Hey folks, tonight we're stepping aboard one of the most legendary ships in history, the RMS Titanic. Picture her now, gleaming under a crisp April sun, docked proudly in Southampton, England. The hull stretches longer than any building you've ever stood beside. Seagulls circle lazily overhead. The steam hisses. And the crowd, oh, the crowdmen in bowler hats, children with bright cheeks, and women clutching parasols, all gathered for a glimpse of the unsinkable giant. If you're curling up with us for the first time, I'd love to know where in the world are you listening from, and what time is it there? Drop a comment with your location and your local hour. And if you enjoy this kind of gentle, soothing history, subscribing is a simple way to support more stories like this. Now, let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's April 10th, 1912, and Southampton is buzzing. The Titanic, largest moving object ever built by human hands, is preparing for her maiden voyage across the Atlantic. She's not just a ship, she's a marvel, a floating city, a palace for the rich and a pathway to dreams for the poor. And for most of the 2,200 people boarding today, she's also a mystery. The harbor smells like salt and coal smoke. A boy drops his apple, and it rolls across the dock, stopping at the heel of a sailor. Children wave, unaware that this moment will one day be etched in textbooks and films. But for now, it's just another Wednesday. We drift among the passengers. In first class, we pass the Astors. There's yes, there's as to a hotel empire. John Jacob Astor is strolling casually beside his much younger pregnant wife. Their luggage? Enough to fill a small apartment. A few feet away, a man wearing a hand-me-down coat clutches his ticket in sweaty fingers. He's in third-class steerage, but his eyes are glowing. He's never seen a ship so grand. This isn't just a journey west. It's a fresh start. Somewhere midship, a steward gently guides a lady up the gangway. She's nervous. It's her first time at sea. Her gloved hand trembles, and she whispers a prayer in Irish. Her name is Mary, and she's one of hundreds of immigrants heading to America, each with a secret reason for leaving home. We pass a stoker below deck, shirtless and coated in coal dust. He wipes sweat from his brow and mutters, "She'll need more than pride to cross the Atlantic." No one hears him, of course. They're too busy marveling at the brass railings and polished decks. Bell rings out. Final boarding. A group of musicians hurries past with their instrument cases, laughing softly, unaware they'll be playing through history soon enough. As the mooring ropes are drawn in, the Titanic lets out a low, rumbling growl. It echoes across the harbor like a beast awakening. People cheer. Hats are thrown into the air. Confetti drifts down like snowfall. Somewhere, a girl presses her face to the glass of a porthole, watching England shrink behind her. The ship glides out slowly, pulled by tugboats, nearly brushing another liner in the harbor, the New York, which strains at its moorings in the Titanic's wake. An omen? Maybe. But for now, no one's concerned. The sun is shining, the champagne is chilled, and everything feels just right. As we move with the ship down the English Channel, we stop in Cherbourg, France, to pick up more passengers, many of them first class, including a certain Molly Brown, who will soon earn the nickname Unsinkable. She doesn't know it yet, of course. She's just sipping tea and making witty observations in a green dress that shimmers like seaweed. By the time Titanic leaves Queenstown, Ireland her final stop before heading out into the open Atlantic, she is carrying 2,224 souls. Among them, millionaires, immigrants, engineers, chefs, children, and yes, even a few dogs. One Pomeranian, in particular, will have quite the story to tell. The sea is calm that evening. A soft breeze ruffles the flags, and passengers explore the decks. Some are giddy, others quiet. One young man leans over the railing and whispers, "I'm finally leaving everything behind." He smiles. Above them, the stars begin to appear. one by one, like lanterns lighting the way. The ship hums softly as it picks up speed. Smokestacks puff rhythmically. Somewhere below, coal is being shoveled by the ton. Titanic is officially underway. The journey has begun. And though the world will never forget how it ends, tonight, it's all beginnings. As the Titanic steams westward into the open Atlantic, the excitement begins to settle into something softer routine, perhaps. The passengers are no longer waving from railings or pointing at distant shores. Now, they're settling into their temporary floating homes. Let's step inside with them. First-class accommodations feel more like a five-star hotel than a ship. As you walk the wide carpeted hallways, your footsteps fall quietly on soft Axminster rugs imported from England. The wallpaper is patterned, the sconce is warm. You'd be forgiven for forgetting the ocean entirely, unless you pause at a window and see the wide, heaving blue. Each first-class cabin has its own character. Some are Art Nouveau with delicate floral motifs. Others lean French Regency gilt mirrors, plush chairs, mahogany wardrobes. Passengers have private toilets and access to Turkish baths. One suite even has a private promenade deck. It's less like traveling and more like living in a particularly mobile mansion. In one such suite, we find a woman carefully removing pearl hairpins before lying down for a nap. Her gloves are folded neatly on the dresser. She's already sent a postcard home. A dream of a ship feels as steady as land. If only she knew how that sentence would echo. But let's shift decks. Second class is modest but respectable. Clean cabins, shared bathrooms, and attentive stewards. Families traveling together squeeze into adjoining rooms. Some are on holiday. Others are academics, engineers, or pastors, traveling for conferences or new jobs. There's still a dining room and a promenade, but it's simpler. Less lace, more linoleum. Still, the food is good and the service is polite. Most second-class passengers feel lucky they're on the Titanic after all. Further down we go, below the waterline, into third-class steerage. The air grows warmer here. Pipes line the ceiling. There are long hallways of narrow bunks, 4 to a room, sometimes more. Curtains offer a little privacy, but not much. Still, for many immigrants aboard, it's a palace compared to the homes they left behind. The Irish girls giggle together, washing their hair in cold water. A Polish family gathers for a quiet meal of brown bread and jam. A Swedish teenager pulls out his accordion and begins to play softly, the melody drifting through the metal corridors like a dream. The food here is simpler stews, boiled potatoes, bread, tea. But it's hot, and there's plenty. That alone makes it remarkable. At night, the ship is a floating hive. The boiler rooms, deeper still, are alive with clanging metal and sweating stokers. These men barely see daylight. They shovel coal into open furnaces that roar like dragons. Without them, Titanic would be no more than a silent hulk. And yet, above them, the music plays. First-class passengers dine on oysters, consomme, lamb with mint sauce, and peaches in chartreuse jelly. One gentleman requests a second serving of quail. The waiters wear tails and walk with trained grace. It's hard not to imagine the chefs below grumbling about picky eaters, even as they plate elaborate dishes by candlelight. Meanwhile, a steward in third class helps an elderly woman find the bathroom. She doesn't speak English, but he smiles and points gently. She pats his arm and mutters something in Hungarian. He has no idea what she said, but he nods anyway. In the reading room, a novelist scribbles ideas for his next story, glancing now and then at the waves outside. In the smoking room, men puff cigars and debate the stock market. Somewhere on C deck, a teenage girl is learning to dance the foxtrot. Her shoes are too tight. She doesn't care. Titanic is more than a ship. It's a layered, floating society. It holds entire worlds within it. Wealth and struggle, joy and fear, hope and secrets. It sails like a mobile novel, and every hallway is a chapter. One young steward keeps a notebook. He sketches the ship's grand staircase during his breaks. "When I get off," he tells a fellow porter, "I'll paint it all." The porter snorts and says, "You're an artist now, are you?" The steward grins. "Just need a good brush." The ocean outside remains calm. A moonless sky begins to show stars brighter than most of the passengers have ever seen. The ship is too new, too proud to sway much. Even in steerage, some fall asleep thinking they've never slept so peacefully. And yet, below all the layers, beneath the fine dining and laughter, beyond the luggage trunks and boiler fires, there's a humming, a subtle vibration that never stops. It's the sound of motion, of engines, of fate creeping ever closer. For now, though, Titanic sails on. Every room filled, every heart beating, every deck holding dreams that have not yet begun to fray. Up on deck, the sea stretches out like velvet endless, calm and utterly still. It's April 12th now. The Titanic has left the coastlines behind, sailing deeper into the North Atlantic. To most passengers, it feels like nothing short of perfection. The ship's engines hum with quiet confidence, and the vibrations have become a kind of lullaby. For the wealthy lounging on deck chairs, wrapped in wool blankets against the brisk sea breeze, Titanic is more than transportation. It's a triumph. And more importantly, it feels invincible. That's not a word used lightly in 1912. It was printed in papers, whispered in dining saloons, and repeated by travelers with champagne glasses in hand. "She can't sink," they'd say. "She's the safest ship ever built." And they believed it. After all, Titanic had cutting-edge watertight compartments, a double bottom, and a captain with 40 years of sea experience. The illusion of safety was not just mechanical, it was emotional. In the first-class lounge, set beneath a grand glass dome, passengers sipped tea beside crackling fires. Yes, real fires, electric, flickering, and cozy. The room was styled after Versailles, with gilded moldings and embroidered chairs. A place like this doesn't feel temporary. It feels eternal. A man in his 50s, retired and recently widowed, writes in his journal, "This ship is steadier than my own home." He notes, "I may never get off." It's a throwaway comment, but it lingers like a ghost. Over in second class, a pastor from Devon is giving a small sermon in the lounge. A handful of listeners, dressed in Sunday clothes, nod quietly as he speaks of journeys, of grace, of protection on the seas. And in third class, down at the lower stern, a dance is broken out. A fiddler plays, toes tap, and hands clap. A young Irish woman spins her sister around, laughing so hard she nearly trips on her own skirt. A Greek man claps along, not knowing the tune but feeling its rhythm. Music has no border, after all. Titanic feels like a world unto itself, unbothered, uncheckable. The ship's designers even left off several lifeboats, not due to arrogance, they'd claim, but aesthetics. The deck would look too cluttered with more. Besides, the ship was unsinkable, right? Of course, there were quiet voices, whispers in the margins. An old sailor in Queenstown had frowned as the Titanic pulled away. "Too fast, too proud," he'd muttered. Another, a wireless operator aboard a different ship, sent ice warnings that went unanswered, but these were background noises to most, like the creaks of old wood or the distant cry of a gull. Easy to ignore. Captain Smith, one of the most seasoned seafarers alive, walked the bridge with calm assurance. This was to be his final voyage before retirement. A golden ending to a golden career. He smiled easily, posed for photos, dined with aristocrats. His confidence was contagious. One evening, a group of women gathered near the grand staircase to admire the ship's craftsmanship. They ran fingers over carved oak panels, pointed out cherubs on the banisters, and compared it to the Ritz. "It's like being in a dream," one whispered. Meanwhile, a crewman below deck wiped his brow and grumbled, "A floating furnace, more like." But he chuckled after. Even the workers felt pride. Titanic was a marvel, and they were a part of it. And it was magnificent. The size alone was dizzying 4 city blocks long, 11 stories high from keel to smokestack. A young boy wandered from his mother, conking portholes as he walked. He lost track at 57. The ship had its own newspaper, its own post office, its own squash court, gym, and barbershop. You could send a letter, get a shave, and play a few rounds of racquetball without ever seeing land. Every night, the ship's band played waltzes and ragtime. The leader, Wallace Hartley, always insisted on formal attire, no matter the venue. Even in third class, where pay was low and perks were fewer, the musicians played with dignity. Yet even among all this splendor, the sea was still present. At night, the wind hissed through the railings. The moon cast long, silver streaks on the water. Far from shore, the world turned cold and black. Occasionally, a passenger would step out alone and feel the ocean's hugeness, the way it swallowed sound. One woman later recalled stepping on deck after dinner. She said the stars looked so close, she felt she could reach up and touch them. But then the cold reminded her that she was very small and very far from anywhere. Still, Titanic gave people comfort, a sense of control. It was a ship built by the best, for the best. And even for those who weren't wealthy, just being on it felt like being lifted somehow. Of course, the sea doesn't read newspapers. It doesn't care about class or craftsmanship. But for now, the illusion held. And somewhere on a crisp white deck chair, beneath a thick wool blanket, an old woman dozed off with a book on her lap. The title? The Wreck of the Titan, a fictional story about an unsinkable ship that hits an iceberg. But she'd only made it halfway through. The waves had lulled her to sleep. Morning breaks with a gold-streaked sky over the Atlantic. The Titanic glides forward, casting a long, rippling shadow across the calm sea. The boilers churn invisibly below, and steam rises in soft white columns from the towering funnels. Breakfast is being served. But today, we're not heading to the dining rooms. No, today we follow the quiet echoes, the ones left behind in letters, journals, and mementos tucked into luggage trunks. Because while the Titanic herself no longer speaks, her passengers do through the things they carried and the words they left behind. Let's begin with a letter. In a cramped third-class cabin, an Irish immigrant named Nora writes to her cousin in New York. She folds the paper carefully, her handwriting slanting in elegant loops. We are treated well aboard, though I miss the air back home. The sea is kind. I saw the stars like I've never seen them, and thought of you. She adds a small sketch of the ship at the bottom, complete with 4 proud funnels. It's delicate, a bit crooked, and oddly perfect. In first class, a different letter is being written. This one on embossed stationery, with thick, expensive ink. Lady Duff Gordon, a prominent fashion designer, writes to a friend in London. The journey is smooth, and the company most agreeable. I'm told the Turkish baths are a delight, though I've avoided the gymnasium scandalously unladylike to sweat. Still, the motion of the ship is barely felt. It's like sailing in a crystal ballroom. Different decks, different hands, but the same human impulse to capture a moment, to send a sliver of life to someone far away. Now imagine what these letters felt like as they were written. A steel hull cutting through salt air, the clatter of typewriters, the hushed muttering in a dozen languages, the occasional burst of laughter. Passengers carried books, pocket watches, lockets, rosaries, lace handkerchiefs. A 10-year-old boy named Frank tucked a toy into his coat pocket, a small stuffed dog, worn soft from years of love. He showed it to a steward, who smiled and said, "That pup looks like he knows how to swim." Not all passengers were sentimental. Some brought only the essentials: spare shoes, clean collars, a shaving kit. One woman smuggled her cat aboard. It meowed once, then vanished into the maze of cabins, probably claiming its own deck chair somewhere. Down in the postal sorting room, a narrow corridor packed with canvas mailbags, postal clerks worked quickly. Over 3,000 sacks of letters and parcels were aboard Titanic, each marked for destinations all over North America. The clerks had brought their best uniforms in a kind of quiet pride. A floating post office, it seemed almost absurd. And yet, it operated with perfect precision. One young couple from Sweden carried a family Bible wrapped in linen. It had made it through wars, drought, and hunger, and now across the ocean. It never arrived. There were wedding gowns in trunks, diaries locked with ribbon. One man carried 50 jars of pickles. No one knows why. Maybe he just really liked pickles. Or maybe it was a family recipe. Either way, the jars were carefully packed. And then, of course, there were dreams. A baker from England had heard there were jobs, aplenty in New York. He brought letters of recommendation and 3 loaves of bread he refused to part with. Real English bread, he said. The Yanks don't bake like we do. A French violinist brought his instrument, tucked safely in a leather case. He intended to audition for an orchestra in Chicago. He played it every night from his bunk. And a nurse from Edinburgh brought a photograph of her fiancé, who was waiting in Boston. She kissed it once each morning before tucking it back into her coat. Objects don't just carry weight. They carry intention, hope, memory. Later, after the iceberg, some of these belongings would float strangely intact on the surface of the sea. A suitcase bobbing gently, full of shoes. A child's wooden top. A postcard, still legible, curled and water-stained. The passengers of Titanic were more than statistics. They were collectors of moments. They carried things they believed would be useful, beautiful, or simply comforting. Some were bound for new lives. Others were returning home. But all of them had packed carefully, lovingly, not knowing the sea might soon claim every last stitch. Some survivors would later say they mourned their diaries as much as their clothes, their wedding photos more than their jewelry, because what the Titanic took wasn't just life, it was stories frozen mid-sentence. And yet, a few voices slipped through. A letter mailed from Queenstown survived, sent ashore before the ship left Irish waters. It reads, "It is the most splendid ship. I feel like a queen. If this is the future, I like it." It was signed by Annie, a third-class passenger who would not survive the night of April 14th. But her words did. They still do. The days at sea glide by like dreams soft-edged, suspended in time, wrapped in the steady thrum of engines and the cool salt air. It's April 13th, and the Titanic is now far from any coastline, drifting across the mid-Atlantic like a floating palace on a mirror. The ocean is remarkably calm. Some say eerily so. Barely a wave disturbs the surface, and passengers note it in their diaries. A pond, not a sea, one woman writes. The mood aboard reflects the gentle water's relaxed content, almost celebratory. On the upper decks, passengers bundle against the breeze, chatting and watching the endless blue. A few play shuffleboard. One elderly gentleman insists on his daily walk, despite the wind tangling his mustache in every direction. His wife follows 2 paces behind, occasionally muttering about pneumonia. "If I've survived 2 wars," he replies, "I can handle sea air." Elsewhere, children chase hoops, darting between grown-ups with polite giggles. One young girl, no older than 6, pauses at a railing to peer over the edge. Her father joins her and says, "That's the same ocean Columbus crossed." She nods sagely and whispers, "Looks like it goes forever." Below, in the second-class library, a group of women sip tea and compare novels. They argue cheerfully about Brontë versus Austen. A steward, clearly amused, chimes in with, Mark Twain, ladies' American humor is the future. One woman eyes him and replies, "If I wanted humor, I'd marry a butcher." Meals are small events in themselves. In first class, the menus read like gourmet fantasies. Filet mignon, oysters, lamb with mint jelly, roast squab, and French ice cream. Every meal is multiple courses. Wine flows. So do compliments to the chef. On April 13th's dinner menu, consomme Olga, salmon with mousseline sauce, and peaches in chartreuse jelly. Fancy? Absolutely. But even fancier is the orchestra nearby, playing Strauss while passengers sip their coffee from China. In third class, the meals are far simpler but hearty. Porridge and herring for breakfast, soup, bread, and stew for dinner. But the stews are thick, and the bread is warm. Families gather around shared tables, eating with real silverware, something many have never used before. "I could get used to this," says a boy from County Mayo, licking his spoon. "Don't," his mother snaps. "We'll be back to Spud soon enough." Afternoons are filled with idle delight. In first class, some retreat to the smoking room, playing cards under domed ceilings, while sunlight filters through stained glass. Others attend teas, flirt casually, or discuss business. A gentleman in a tweed jacket boasts that his company's stock is climbing. The Titanic, he declares, is proof that progress can't be stopped. In second class, a music teacher gives an impromptu lesson to a curious child using a borrowed violin. On the deck, two German immigrants play chess with a makeshift board scratched into the wooden floor. A steward watches, scratching his chin. "Didn't know chess could look like war," he says. And then there's the band. Wallace Hartley and his fellow musicians are practically everywhere. They float from first-class lounges to second-class salons, performing soft melodies, waltzes, and ragtime numbers. Never flashy, always refined. At one point, they strike up Alexander's Ragtime Band, and a second-class couple quietly sways along. They don't dance, exactly just a gentle leaning into the rhythm, shoulder to shoulder. In third class, however, dancing does break out. Fiddlers from Ireland and Italy take turns leading the crowd. The air is filled with clapping and stomping and laughter. Children spin. Young men try to impress girls with fancy footwork. A baby giggles in its mother's arms as she bounces to the rhythm. It's warm down here, lively, human. And somewhere in all of this, the dancing, the dining, the dazzling blue horizon, lies the quiet belief that the Titanic is untouchable, that she will carry her passengers across the ocean, not just safely, but splendidly. Even the crew seems at ease. Stewards are courteous and smiling. Officers stand at their posts with calm professionalism. Captain Smith himself walks the promenade, tipping his cap to ladies, nodding to children. He looks like the embodiment of naval confidence. No one talks of danger. Not really. There are ice warnings, yes. Telegraphs from other ships noting growlers and bergs in the area. But it's April. Ice is expected. And besides, the Titanic is fast, sturdy, and built like a fortress. That night, the sky is spectacular. With no moon and no city lights, the stars stretch endlessly overhead, sharp and silver. The Milky Way spills across the heavens like scattered frost. Couples bundle together on deck chairs just to admire it. One man leans back and whispers, "Makes you feel small, doesn't it?" His wife replies, "Small but lucky." It's a perfect evening. And like all perfect evenings, no one wants it to end. The Titanic is now halfway across the Atlantic, and each day the ship feels more like a village structured, social, and humming with daily life. But just beneath the elegance and laughter lies a quieter truth. This isn't just a voyage across the sea. It's a voyage through an invisible social maze. The decks may be stacked by class, but the lives lived aboard intersect in surprising ways. Let's walk those decks now, not just physically, but socially. Up in first class, The elite enjoy their floating castle with a certain ease. There's a rhythm to their days. Breakfast in the dining saloon, a stroll on the promenade, reading in the lounge, and always dressing for dinner. Suits are pressed. Gloves are spotless. Jewelry glints in the sunlight like a challenge to nature itself. At the center of this refined world is a glittering cast of characters. There's Benjamin Guggenheim, dapper and always dressed to impress, with a valet not far behind. He's been traveling abroad and now returns to America with quiet poise. Nearby is Isidore Strauss, co-owner of Macy's department store, always seen walking arm in arm with his wife, Ida. The two are inseparable wealthy, yes, but humble and deeply in love. A fellow passenger once joked, if she could sit in his pocket, she would. Margaret Molly Brown is the opposite boisterous, sharp-witted, and impossible to ignore. She's a self-made woman, richer in resilience than refinement. She's learning French on the ship and jokes that she'll out-talk the Parisians in a week. Her voice carries down the halls like a song that refuses to stay in tune, and people love her for it. But the Titanic isn't just a first-class affair. Step down into second class, and you find a different world one of teachers, ministers, merchants, and middle-class families chasing possibility. Their rooms are modest, their clothes more practical. But there's dignity here. Children play word games. Wives knit on deck. The conversations here are less about investments and more about jobs, schools, futures. A teacher from Scotland is traveling with her sister. They sit each morning with notebooks, writing poems about the sea. They'll read them aloud over tea and giggle like schoolgirls, despite being well into their 30s. Then there's third-class steerage. This is where the dreams live most vividly. People who have never been this far from home, never seen electric lights, never eaten meat 3 days in a row. They don't see themselves as poor, only on the way. They speak in dozens of languages, from Polish to Swedish to Arabic. And though the quarters are cramped and the baths few, there's a fierce sense of hope in the air. Young men brag about the jobs waiting for them in New York. Women compare baby names. Families sing lullabies in softly rocking bunks. Even the discomfort is endured with optimism. A boy from Syria holds his little sister's hand and says, "We'll have a candy shop when we get there. You can eat all the red ones." She grins, toothless, and nods solemnly. And yet, for all the dividing lines between these classes, strange little connections spring up. A first-class child drops her doll over a railing. It lands miraculously at the feet of a third-class boy 2 decks below. He returns it through a steward, and she sends back a peppermint. It's not much, but it's something. A steward from London helps a third-class Italian woman find her way to the dining room. He doesn't speak Italian. She doesn't speak English. But between gestures and smiles, they manage. When they part, she kisses his hand. He blushes for the rest of the afternoon. Below deck, a fireman from Belfast teaches a cabin boy from Cornwall how to play dice. No gambling, the older man says, just luck lessons. Even in a ship designed to keep classes apart, separate dining rooms, staircases, even gates, human connection finds its way. Kindness slips through cracks. Jokes cross barriers. Glances, gifts, songs, they can't be confined. Still, hierarchy is everywhere. When a third-class man tries to peek into a first-class hallway, he's gently but firmly turned back. When a maid accidentally uses the wrong staircase, she's scolded. Protocol, protocol, protocol. Yet the ship itself, ironically, does not care who you are. It floats the same for kings and cooks alike. The deck pitches just as gently under the diamond-studded heel as it does beneath the scuffed boot. At night, when the stars come out and the cold creeps in, the differences fade just a little. Everyone breathes the same air. Everyone hears the same hum of engines. Everyone lies in a bed, fancy or not, and dreams of what waits across the ocean. and somewhere perhaps in the second-class smoking room, or along a quiet stretch of third-class hallway, a thought flickers in someone's mind. We're all on the same ship, after all. It's now Sunday, April 14th, 1912. The final full day aboard the Titanic. But no one knows that yet. The morning rises slowly. The ship moves steadily through open waters, slicing through the North Atlantic like a cathedral on a mission. The sea is flatter than ever still as glass, some say. There's no wind, no waves, just a haunting calm that seems to hush even the laughter on deck. But aboard the Titanic, the mood is cheerful. Routine has settled in. Passengers know where the good chairs are when tea is served, and which stewards are most likely to sneak them extra jam or a second helping of pie. In first class, Sunday is a day of leisure. Breakfast is served as always, with the usual soft clinking of silverware and murmured pleasantries. The menu includes smoked haddock, fresh rolls, marmalade, and kidneys and bacon. Fat a flavor, more adventurous than it sounds. A few passengers glance at the Sunday paper reprints, which the ship's printing press issues daily. They skim the headlines, none of which mention icebergs. Lady Duff Gordon discusses Paris fashions over toast points. Bustles are back, she says, and I'm not entirely sure that's a good thing. Molly Brown raises an eyebrow. I've got a bustle and a derriere, and only one of them's going anywhere. Laughter ripples through the table. Captain Smith attends a private luncheon. He looks calm, a man with a career of oceans behind him. This is his final voyage before retirement. His beard is white. His eyes are soft. Someone asks if the sea has ever frightened him. He smiles gently and says, "The sea is never cruel, only indifferent." Up on deck, a church service is held for second-class passengers. Hymns float upward into the sky like threads of sound woven into the breeze. Families gather with heads bowed. For those in peril on the sea, they sing with no sense of irony. Meanwhile, in third class, the young crowd prepares for one last night of dancing. Word spreads of another ceilidh below deck. Fiddlers are polishing their bows. A group of Swedes is promised to bring bread and cheese. "Don't eat too much," warns one of the Irish girls. "You'll get dizzy when you spin." He grins. "Only if I'm lucky." By midday, ice warnings begin arriving. The wireless operators, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, are busy, very busy. They sit in their small cabin near the top of the ship, surrounded by clicking Morse equipment and towers of incoming messages. The wireless is brand new technology, and Titanic is proud to have it. But it's not just for navigational use. Most passengers send telegrams to friends back home. Smooth sailing. Food divine. See you Wednesday. Ship is astonishing. Tell mother not to worry, no rocking at all. The ice warnings, though urgent, pile up between these messages. Ships nearby like the Mesaba and Californian warn of icebergs and field ice dead ahead. The operators acknowledge some. Others are missed. They're overloaded, mostly relaying personal messages for the first-class clientele. And besides, the sea still looks peaceful. That afternoon, Titanic receives a final warning about large ice fields. It's delivered to the bridge. Captain Smith is informed, but it's late in the day. The sun is shining. The sea is like silk. The ship sails on. In the dining saloons, passengers enjoy their last Sunday dinner aboard. First class is treated to another extravagant menu. Roast duckling, spring lamb, creamed carrots, pudding with French custard, and wines from across Europe. Men in tuxedos clink glasses. Women in gowns glide through the room like chandeliers with feet. One elderly couple celebrates their anniversary. "To another 30 years, he says. She pats his hand and replies, "One day at a time, dear." In second class, the food is simpler cold meats, fruit, coffee, but still well prepared and served with care. The dining room buzzes with pleasant chatter. New friendships have formed. Some passengers linger longer at their tables than usual, reluctant to end the last full day of this adventure. Third class dines a bit earlier stew, bread, cheese, and apple tart. Children laugh. A woman hums softly as she feeds her baby mashed carrots. The air smells faintly of onions and seawater. As the sun sets, the ship begins to cool. The temperature drops noticeably. Stewards bring extra blankets. Passengers on deck notice their breath clouding. The stars begin to emerge, brighter than ever. With no moon and no clouds, the sky becomes a crystal dome. One passenger describes it as falling upward into forever. The sea mirrors the stars, so calm and still, it's nearly impossible to tell where the ocean ends and the sky begins. At 7:15 p.m., the last ice warning is received from the Californian. It mentions large ice fields ahead, but the message never reaches the bridge. Phillips, the senior operator, is busy sending passenger messages. He taps out Morse code rapidly, headphones on, trying to clear a backlog of transmissions. When the Californian operator interrupts him again, Phillips snaps back. "Shut up! Shut up! I'm working Cape Race." At 9 p.m., officers on the bridge note the temperature is falling. It's now just above freezing. The air smells different, sharper, saltier, colder. Still, the ship charges forward at nearly full speed, 22 knots. The night is silent, but the engines churn relentlessly. Below deck, the third-class dance begins. The fiddles play fast. Feet stomp in time. A young girl tries her first twirl and stumbles into a handsome Italian boy who smiles and bows. "You spin very fine," he says. She grins. It's the shoes. Above, in the smoking lounge, a game of bridge goes late into the evening. A few players glance out the windows, marveling at the serene darkness. "Never seen a night like this," someone says. Another mutters, "Bit too quiet, if you ask me." And somewhere far off, invisible to the naked eye, a shape drifts in the night, silent, waiting, hard as stone and older than memory. But on the decks of Titanic, laughter still echoes. Music still floats. Dreams still spin in the lantern light. The calm before the storm feels like a lullaby. The clock has now struck 11:30 p.m., April 14th, 1912. Most passengers are tucked into bed, lulled by the soft mechanical heartbeat of the ship. Some are still reading by lamplight. Others murmur their last goodnights. Up on deck, the cold has grown bitter sharp enough to make the skin sting. But no one suspects that the Titanic is gliding straight into a field of floating death. Let's rise to the crow's nest now. High above the decks, far above the laughter and luxury, two lookouts, Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee, stand watch in the freezing air. The night is moonless, but the stars are so bright they cast a faint glow on the glassy sea. The Atlantic stretches out in eerie silence. No waves, no swell. Just blackness and starlight. Fleet rubs his eyes. It's hard to see without binoculars. They were forgotten in Southampton. Their absence will later be discussed in courts and inquiries. But at the moment, he simply squints and scans. And then, just before 11:40 p.m., something materializes in the distance. At first, it's nothing. Just a darker shape against a dark sky. But then it becomes unmistakable. A jagged ridge of whiteness. Ice. Fleet rings the warning bell, 3 rapid clangs. Then he grabs the phone to the bridge and says a sentence that will become one of the most chilling in maritime history. "Iceberg, right ahead." Down on the bridge, First Officer Murdoch reacts instantly. "Hard a starboard," he orders. The helmsman turns the wheel. The engines are reversed. Doors begin to seal across the ship's lower bulkheads. But the Titanic is massive. It's nearly 3 city blocks long and moving at 22 knots, far too fast to stop in time. 37 seconds after the warning, the iceberg scrapes along the starboard side. It's not a dramatic impact. There's no theatrical explosion. No sudden jolt to send passengers flying. In fact, many aboard feel nothing at all. A slight vibration, a faint shiver. A few report hearing a long, low grinding like tearing cloth, or dragging a spoon across porcelain. But below the waterline, the iceberg's jagged teeth open the hull like a zipper. 6 watertight compartments flood almost immediately. Titanic was designed to stay afloat, with 4 flooded, but not 6. At first, confusion reigns. In first class, a man sits up in bed and frowns. "Did you hear that?" he asks his wife. She blinks sleepily. "Just a wave," she murmurs. In second class, a boy gets out of bed and tiptoes to the porthole. "Something hit us," he whispers. His father yawns. "Go back to sleep." But in third class, the reality is felt more sharply. Water rushes in under the doorways, cold and sudden, like a slap. A group of steerage passengers awake to the sound of boots splashing. One man opens the door to find seawater already ankle-deep. "Get up," he shouts. "Get up now." Below, the boiler rooms are chaos. Stokers scramble to escape the rising tide. The lights flicker as salt water floods electrical circuits. Engineers work furiously to contain the damage, but it's already too late. Titanic is wounded. On the bridge, Captain Smith receives the report from Thomas Andrews, the ship's designer, who's aboard for the voyage. Smith listens in silence as Andrews explains, calmly but clearly, that the ship will sink. "She will not last more than 2 hours," he says. The words hang in the air like frost. Smith nods, then moves with eerie calm. He orders the lifeboats uncovered, sends word to awaken all passengers. He walks the decks, giving instructions, his face pale and unreadable. At 12 a.m., officers begin to knock on cabin doors. In first class, confusion turns to disbelief. "Get dressed," they're told. Just a precaution. Many assume it's nonsense. The ship can't sink. It's the Titanic. A few even laugh, throwing coats over pajamas and heading to the deck as if attending a midnight party. Molly Brown wraps herself in a wool coat and mutters, "This had better not interfere with breakfast." In second class, the mood is more uncertain. Families huddle in corridors, waiting for information. Some children cry. A young couple clutches hands silently. The husband says, "It's probably nothing." His voice cracks on the last word. In third class, panic spreads fast. Gates block the way to upper decks. Stewards try to maintain order, but language barriers and fear make communication nearly impossible. Some passengers push forward. Others freeze in confusion. A few are led up by crew. Others are told to wait. And all the while, the water creeps higher. Up above, the lifeboats begin to swing out. There aren't enough. Titanic carries only 20 boats, enough for about half the people aboard. The result of outdated regulations, aesthetic preferences, and blind optimism. At 12:15 a.m., the wireless operators send their first distress signal. CQD, CQD, Titanic struck iceberg. We require immediate assistance. Nearby ships receive it, including the Carpathia, 58 miles away, and the Californian, just 10. But the Californian's wireless operator has gone to bed. Back in the radio room, Phillips keeps tapping out the signals, over and over. Come at once. We are sinking. Still, most passengers do not yet understand the gravity of what's happening. Some are still in formal wear. Some carry pets. One man brings a banjo, another a brandy flask, and some laugh nervously, certain they'll be back in bed within the hour. But down in the bowels of the ship, the water is winning. And up on deck, the stars shine quietly over it all, watching. By 12:30 a.m., April 15th, the Titanic has begun to list slightly to starboard. It's subtle, but noticeable. Cups slide slowly across tables. A few chairs tip. Those paying attention begin to understand. The Titanic isn't just damaged. She is dying. The chill is biting now. The North Atlantic air hovers just below freezing, and the deck rails are slick with frost. Passengers huddle in coats, scarves, anything they can find. A steward hands out life jackets. Some passengers refuse to put them on. "It's unsightly," says one woman in first class, grimacing at the bulky cork straps. Surely this is all theatrical. But others comply, nervously tying the thick ropes around their chests with cold fingers. No one is quite sure what's real and what's overreaction. The orchestra plays on soft, steady, almost meditative. Some say it's a waltz. Others remember ragtime. But whatever it is, the music soothes nerves like warm tea. It is intentional. It is calming. And it works. The first lifeboats begin to launch. Here is where things get strange, not for lack of boats, but for how empty they are. Boat No. 7, with a capacity of 65, leaves with only 28 aboard. Some women refuse to go without their husbands. Some men refuse to board while women remain. The code of women and children first is honored, but also misinterpreted. Officers push back against hesitant passengers. In the confusion, time bleeds away. Meanwhile, Thomas Andrews, Titanic's architect, is seen moving quickly from deck to deck. He urges people to put on life jackets, to get out of their cabins, to take the lifeboat seriously. He speaks softly, insistently. "Ladies, you must get what you can in the boats." A first-class woman thanks him and asks, "But where will you be?" He replies simply, "I will stay with the ship." Down in third class, it's a different world. Many are still behind locked gates, not out of cruelty, but order. The ship was designed to keep classes separate for health inspections, an outdated practice that now becomes deadly. Stewards struggle to organize and guide frightened passengers through narrow corridors, many of them flooded or tilted. Language barriers make things worse. A Hungarian mother clutches her baby and cries for someone to explain. A young Finnish man yells in broken English, trying to find stairs. A crewman finally begins leading a group upward, waving his cap and shouting, "This way, come." They climb into darkness. The electricity flickers. By 1 a.m., the bow of the ship is noticeably lower. More boats are launched, but still not full. Officers are now more forceful. "Women only," they shout. In some cases, husbands are torn from wives. In others, couples refuse to part. Ida Strauss, offered a seat, declines it and steps back beside her husband. "Where you go, I go," she says. They walk away from the boat, hand in hand. Nearby, Molly Brown helps women into lifeboats. She urges them gently, wraps coats around shivering shoulders. When her turn comes, she hesitates. "Go on, madam," an officer insists. "There'll be work for you down there." She finally climbs aboard, but not without shouting back, "I expect tea when we're done saving the world." The decks are now more crowded. The truth is settling in. The ship is sinking. A man runs past in shirt sleeves, calling out a name, "Lena, Lena," again and again. No one answers. A steward tries to calm a group of teenage girls huddled near the stairwell. "We'll all be picked up," he tells them. "Just a matter of time." The lights flicker again. Captain Smith moves through the ship, still calm. At one point, he leans over the bridge rail and says, almost to himself, "It's every man for himself now." Then he disappears into the night. In the Marconi room, the wireless operators keep tapping. "Come quick. SOS. Coordinates. 41.46N, 50.14W. It's one of the first times in history the new distress call SOS is used. The Carpathia replies. She's coming, but she's over 4 hours away. And the Californian? Just 10 miles off, visible to the eye, but her operator is asleep. Her lights flicker in the distance, and Titanic's crew tries signaling by Morse lamp. No response. They launch distress rockets, brilliant white flares shooting into the black sky like silent screams. People cheer when the rockets go up. They think it means rescue is near. They are wrong. By 1:30 a.m., the forward deck is nearly at the waterline. More lifeboats are launched, now with more urgency and more fear. Boat No. 14 is lowered into the water with 60 passengers, many of them children. Officer Lowe fires warning shots in the air to prevent a crush at the railing. No one is hit, but the sound is jarring, final. In the freezing dark, the sea waits. A man jumps into the water, panicked. Another climbs back out, soaked and shivering. "Don't do that," a crewman says quietly. "Wait your turn." And the band plays on. Wallace Hartley and his musicians are still at it on the boat deck now. They know what's coming. They play for the passengers. They play for themselves. Someone says the final song is Nearer, My God, to Thee. Others say it was a waltz. It hardly matters. What matters is that the music didn't stop. It never stopped. The sea now laps at the nameplate of the ship. And above it all, the stars, silent, ancient, unmoving, look down. It's now just after 2 a.m. on April 15th. The Titanic, once the pride of the seas, is gasping her final breaths. Her bow is deeply submerged. The stern rises ever so slightly into the air. The deck tilts just enough to force people to lean as they walk, or stumble if they run. But still, they move desperately, searching for lifeboats, for loved ones, for answers. The last lifeboats are being lowered. Boat No. 4 leaves the port side. The davits creak and groan, ropes stiff with frost. On board, women cradle infants wrapped in shawls. One child asks, "Are we coming back for tea?" A mother blinks quickly, smiling through tears. "Of course, darling. And biscuits, too." In the crowd, confusion turns to chaos. With only a few boats left, desperation surges. One collapsible lifeboat, Collapsible C, is lowered hastily. A group of men attempts to rush it. Officer Murdoch draws his pistol. He fires a warning shot, then another. The crowd freezes. Some say a man was shot. Others say he turned back in shame. No one can say for certain. The truth is blurred by panic. Meanwhile, John Jacob Astor, one of the wealthiest men in the world, helps his young wife into a lifeboat. She's 5 months pregnant. He asks if he may join her. An officer says no. Astor nods politely, steps back, and lights a cigarette. "Tell them I'll catch up," he says with a half smile. He never does. On the starboard side, Collapsible D is filled quickly. The deck is slippery now, and more than one person tumbles. A steward helps a young girl into the boat. She clings to his sleeve and whispers, "Please don't let go." He doesn't until she's safely over the edge. At 2:05 Umlay, the final lifeboat is launched. Collapsible A is hurriedly unhooked, but there's no time to lower it. The ship's tilt is too steep. It's swept from the deck as water surges upward. A few people manage to cling to it as it floats away. Half flooded, others aren't so lucky. Now there are no more boats. Roughly 1,500 people remain aboard. The ship groans an awful sound, like a beast in agony. Metal strains, rivets pop, lights flicker violently, casting strange, strobing shadows across faces that stare upward or downward, or into nothing at all. And still, many cannot believe what is happening. A man in a tuxedo pours himself brandy from a tilting cart. "Might as well enjoy it," he says aloud. No one answers. 2 young lovers from 3rd class tie themselves together with a curtain sash. "If we go," the girl says, "we go together." Her voice shakes, but her grip does not. On the poop deck, the ship's aft section, a priest leads a group in prayer. Some kneel. Others simply cry. A steward, barely 20, joins the circle and whispers, "Forgive us all." Then, just after 2:15 a.m., the Titanic's lights flicker once, twice, and go out. Darkness. Utter darkness, broken only by starlight and the dim glow of the moonless sky. And silence brief, stunned silence. Until the ship breaks. A loud crack, like thunder, echoes across the sea. The stern begins to rise dramatically. People cling to rails. Some fall. Others jump. One woman kisses her crucifix and leaps into the black. The Titanic splits in two. The bow sinks fast, disappearing into the depths. The stern steadies briefly, almost level, then begins its final climb. At 2:20 a.m., the stern of the Titanic stands nearly vertical. People are still on it, clinging, slipping, praying. Some scream. Some sing. One man, near the top rail, tucks a photograph into his jacket pocket. He closes his eyes, and then, in a slow, eerie motion, the stern slides beneath the waves. The Titanic is gone. All that remains is a vast black sea. And the voices. From the water, hundreds of people cry out. Shouts, wails, screams for help. They fill the night like a terrible choir. Some call for mothers, some for children. Some simply call help. Again and again, until their voices break or vanish altogether. The water is 28 degrees Fahrenheit, well below freezing. Hypothermia sets in within minutes. Few can swim in such temperatures. Even fewer survive for long. Some cling to debris doors, barrels, overturned boats. One collapsible, Boat B, floats upside down with about 30 people perched on top. Among them is Second Officer Lytler, soaked and shaking, barking orders to stay balanced. Near him is wireless operator Harold Bride, his legs frozen and bruised, still alive. Nearby, Boat No. 14, under 5th Officer Lowe, returns toward the cries, one of the only boats to do so. Lowe organizes a crew, ties boats together for stability, and then rows back into the field of the dying. They pull a few survivors from the water. A teenage boy, an older man with blue lips, a young woman clutching a baby that does not stir. But for most, it is too late. Within 30 minutes, nearly all of those in the water have fallen silent. The sea is still again. The only sound is the lapping of waves and the distant creak of lifeboats. At 4 a.m., a speck of light appears on the horizon. The Carpathia. She cuts through the dark, moving faster than she ever has before. Her crew lowers blankets, ropes, cocoa. Survivors begin to climb aboard now, stunned, silent. Some weep, others stare. One woman simply says, "He told me to hold on, so I did." By 8:30 a.m., all survivors are aboard the Carpathia. Of the 2,224 people on the Titanic, only 705 remain. And behind them, the sea closes over the wreckage. The ship that was said to be unsinkable now lies 2.5 miles beneath the surface. Her lights extinguished, her dreams scattered. But her story, her voices still ripple across time. Dawn breaks over the Atlantic like a sigh-soft pink light spreading across an ocean still heavy with grief. The Carpathia glides through the swells, her deck lined with weary, silent survivors. Most are wrapped in blankets, woolen coats, or borrowed clothing. Some sit alone, staring at nothing. Others huddle together like birds in a storm, whispering the names of those who did not climb into the lifeboats. The sea, now calm again, offers no hint of the disaster that unfolded hours earlier. No wreckage floats, no screams remain. Only cold water and quiet sky. On board Carpathia, the crew moves with practiced empathy. Cocoa is served in steaming mugs. Dry socks and mittens are passed out. Medical staff examine frostbitten hands and bruised limbs. A woman cradles her child, both still shivering, but alive. She looks up at a nurse and murmurs, "I can't remember the boat number. I only remember the water." In a corner, Molly Brown is already busy. She organizes relief efforts among the first-class survivors, collecting donations to assist the second and third-class passengers who've lost everything. "You've still got your diamonds," she tells one gentleman. "Give a little sparkle back." No one dares argue. Elsewhere, wireless operator Harold Bride is barely conscious. His legs are swollen from the cold. But before collapsing, he insists on relaying one more message from Carpathia's wireless room, this time to let the world know what happened. Titanic sunk. 2:20 a.m. 1,500 lost. Carpathia carrying survivors. The message spreads quickly. In New York, crowds begin to gather near the White Star Line offices. Some weep openly. Others wait with blank faces, scanning lists of names as they trickle in. Not all names are correct. Some are misspelled. Some are missing. But every name is a thread in the larger story, and everyone pulled tight with fear and hope. Back aboard Carpathia, the ship steers toward New York. It is a long journey. Survivors slowly begin to speak, in whispers, in fragments. A woman describes the violinist who played until the sea rose around him. A child asks if the stars will fall again. A young man repeats, over and over, "I tried to pull him up. I tried." Some have survivors' guilt before they even reach shore. One lifeboat passenger refuses to eat. "My brother's at the bottom of the sea," she says. "I don't deserve this soup." And yet, others are already piecing themselves together. A boy promises to become a doctor. A girl vows to learn to swim. One elderly gentleman, who lost his lifelong friend in the sinking, simply says, "I suppose I'll write it down. That's something I can still do." The press, meanwhile, is electric. Journalists swarm the docks in New York. False reports fly faster than the truth. Some claim Titanic didn't sink at all. Others declare there were no survivors. Still others invent tales of heroism and scandal, many of which are later disproved, but not before becoming legend. The arrival of Carpathia on the night of April 18th is unlike anything the city has seen. The ship docks at Pier 54 under heavy rain. A sea of umbrellas crowds the waterfront. Police keep back anxious families, reporters, and gawkers. When the survivors disembark, there is no applause. No cheers, just a thick, aching silence. Some passengers are escorted away quickly. Others linger at the railings, glancing back toward the dark water, as if expecting the Titanic to rise up and correct this impossible mistake. A man stands alone on the pier, soaked in rain, holding a single rose. "She said she'd meet me in New York," he says quietly to no one. "I told her I'd wear a blue hat." He's not wearing one. White Star Line representatives greet survivors with forms and formalities. Some ask them to sign statements. Others simply hand them hotel vouchers and move on. There is little warmth in this moment, only procedure. But a few reunions bring tears. A child calls out to her father alive, though presumed dead. A mother collapses into the arms of her brother. Two strangers who sat side by side in a lifeboat embrace, wordless. They will never see each other again, but for that moment, they are family. And then comes the morning. As names are posted, crowds gasp. The losses are staggering. Whole families are gone. A man who waved goodbye to his wife and children from the dock in Southampton now reads their names on a printed sheet. He sits down on the curb and does not move for hours. Churches across the world hold services. Bells toll. Newspapers print full-page obituaries. The Titanic becomes not just a shipwreck, but a symbol of hubris, of class divide, of fragile progress. In Belfast, shipbuilders gather in stunned silence. Some cry, some deny. One man simply stares at the sea and says, "We built her to be a dream." But the ocean doesn't dream with us. Back on Carpathia, the survivors finish the voyage with different eyes. They now know something many people never do, that life is not guaranteed, and endings do not wait their turn. One survivor watches the Statue of Liberty pass by in the mist and murmurs, "We're all immigrants now." As the ship docks, a new chapter begins not just for them, but for history itself. Titanic's sinking will change maritime law, radio protocol, safety regulations. But more than that, it will remain a story, whispered to children, studied in schools, reimagined on screen and stage. Not because it was the worst disaster or the greatest ship, but because it was human. So terribly human. Now that the survivors are ashore and the headlines scream across every city in the world, the reckoning begins. The Titanic is gone, but its wake is far from silent. Just days after the Carpathia arrives in New York, hearings begin first in the United States, led by Senator William Alden Smith, and soon after in Britain. Both inquiries are urgent and public, with crowds filling the galleries, eager to hear every detail, every whisper of blame or bravery. Senator Smith, a man with thick glasses and a stern expression, opens the proceedings with a solemn tone. "We must understand how such a tragedy could occur," he says, "not just to mourn, but to prevent the next one." Witnesses are called, one after the other. Survivors step forward, their voices still raw. Some wear the same clothes they escaped, in wool skirts, thin jackets, threadbare gloves. They speak of freezing water, missing lifeboats, and the haunting sound of voices crying out in the night. First Officer Lytler, the highest-ranking officer to survive, is questioned at length. He speaks with military precision, but the emotion behind his words occasionally breaks through. He explains the evacuation, the panic, the moment when the ship's stern rose above the water. There was no time for thinking, he says, only doing. Wireless operator Harold Bride, still recovering from his injuries, gives a vivid account of the chaos in the radio room. "We tapped until the water was at our knees," he says. "We sent message after message, and we hoped." Others are not there to speak because they did not survive. Instead, their stories are pieced together through fragments. Letters, eyewitness accounts, memories. Some accounts conflict, others align. It becomes clear that while the iceberg tore the ship, it was human error and complacency that made it fatal. The lack of lifeboats, for example. Only 20 aboard for over 2,200 people. That detail stuns the public. White Star Line executives defend themselves, citing maritime regulations. But the absurdity of the rule requiring lifeboats based on tonnage, not passengers, quickly becomes a symbol of outdated thinking. Even more shocking is the testimony about the Californian. That ship was just 10 miles away. Her crew saw rockets, but failed to respond. Her wireless operator had gone to bed. In the silence of that decision, hundreds died. The captain of the Californian, Stanley Lord, becomes a controversial figure. Some defend him, others condemn him outright. Meanwhile, tales of heroism emerge, and the public clings to them like lanterns in the dark. The band that played until the end. The engineers who stayed below to keep the lights on. Captain Smith, seen on the bridge moments before the final plunge, face lifted to the stars. And Thomas Andrews, Titanic's architect, who was last seen helping women into lifeboats, refusing to leave the ship he had built. One steward remembered Andrews calmly saying, "Ladies, you must get what you can from this. Please hurry." In both the US and UK, the inquiries draw enormous attention. Diagrams of the ship are unfurled. Models of lifeboats are wheeled in. Senators, lords, and journalists argue over angles, speeds, and decisions made minute by minute as the icy water rose. But beneath all the technical details, there is one deeper truth the inquiries cannot ignore. The Titanic was a floating reflection of the world divided by class, driven by progress, and convinced of its own invincibility. And that illusion shattered somewhere in the cold Atlantic. After the hearings, reforms come swiftly. International agreements require more lifeboats for all ships. mandatory lifeboat drills become standard. Radio operators must now stay on duty 24 hours a day. And an international ice patrol is established ships that will monitor the North Atlantic for icebergs and warn others in real time. The Titanic's loss wasn't just a tragedy. It was a turning point. Still, for the survivors, laws and reforms are small comfort. Many live with the scars for the rest of their lives, both seen and unseen. Some never board a ship again. Some dream of icy water every night. One woman avoids bathtubs for the next 40 years. Another insists her children never sleep without life jackets under the bed. And then there are those who never stop telling the story. Molly Brown, hailed as a hero, raises thousands for fellow survivors and lobbies for better maritime safety. She earns her famous nickname, the unsinkable Molly Brown. Eva Hart, who was just 7 when Titanic sank, goes on to give interviews well into her 80s, repeating the tale again and again. People must remember, she says, not just the iceberg, the people. And they do. Titanic's story becomes legend. Books are written. Films are made. Artifacts are displayed in glass cases. Each generation discovers the tale anew. And always, at its heart, are the faces not just the famous, but the forgotten. The stoker who gave up his seat, the maid who carried a child through rising water, the cook who swam for hours in the sea, later insisting it was the whiskey that saved him. In time, the wreck is found. In 1985, over 70 years later, a joint American-French expedition locates Titanic's final resting place, 2.5 miles beneath the surface. The footage reveals eerie stillness, the ship split in two, shrouded in rust and silence. Plates lie stacked on the seafloor. Shoes rest side by side where people once stood. Even in death, Titanic tells a story, not just of ice and iron, but of people, dreams, errors, bravery. And it's a story that continues to ripple through history, like a wake that never fully fades. Even long after the inquiries fade and survivors move quietly into the rhythm of post-Titanic life, the echoes of that night continue to carry across generations like a whisper on the sea breeze. The Titanic becomes more than a ship. It becomes a metaphor for human ambition, for class and inequality, for our faith in machines and the fallibility behind them. Every retelling, whether whispered at a bedside, dramatized in a film, or taught in school, asks the same question. How could something so mighty fall so far? And each answer reveals something different. Let's drift back now to the passengers, to those whose names don't live in museums or on monuments, but whose moments mattered just as deeply. Take the Sage family, a large, working-class group traveling in third class. 11 family members boarded Titanic with dreams of starting anew in Florida. None survived. No headlines bore their names, but their story folded quietly in passenger manifests reminds us that history is not only written by the survivors. Then there was Jack Thayer, a 17-year-old boy from first class, who jumped into the sea as the stern rose behind him. He clung to an overturned lifeboat and survived. Later in life, haunted by memories, he wrote his own account of the night. His reflections carry the weight of both loss and disbelief. There was peace, he recalled, the kind you only find when there's nothing left to be afraid of. Or Violet Jessup, the stewardess, who survived not only the Titanic, but also its sister ships, Olympic and Britannic, both of which suffered accidents. People called her Miss Unsinkable. She called herself lucky, or perhaps just stubborn. These quiet lives form the deeper core of the Titanic's legacy, not the grand staircase or the opulent dining rooms, but the individual heartbeats that filled them. In fact, the Titanic story is unique in its intimacy. So much is known: menus, cabin layouts, personal letters, farewell telegrams. It's as if time wrapped the ship in amber before it was swallowed by the sea. One letter, written by passenger Esther Hart, just hours before the iceberg reads, "We are having a lovely time. I feel as if it was all a dream." A dream? Yes, that's how it often feels. And perhaps that's why the Titanic continues to resonate. Because it sits at the crossroads of dream and disaster, where romance meets tragedy and confidence collides with fate. Each anniversary brings new remembrances. Descendants light candles. Museums host exhibits. Undersea missions bring up teacups, postcards, and once silvered mirrors. Scholars argue over the tiniest details. Did the ship break in two? Was the steel brittle? Could more have been saved? But outside of scholarly circles, ordinary people simply remember the human drama. The musicians, the engineers, the mothers and sailors and lovers, the boys who tossed ice chips on the deck for fun just hours before it all unraveled, the fathers who stayed behind, the daughters who rowed away. And yes, we must speak again about class. Because the Titanic was a floating hierarchy. First class boasted private promenades and walnut-paneled suites. Third class shared lavatories and bunk beds. The lifeboats at times reflected that divide, not just in number, but in access. Gates, confusion, crew priorities. These things mattered in those final hours. And that imbalance is not forgotten. It became a talking point in the hearings. It's still discussed today, not to lay blame, but to ask how the invisible systems we build, class, race, privilege, can become visible when the ship starts sinking. Still, amidst the injustice, stories of selflessness shine. The crewman who gave his coat to a stranger. The stranger who passed her spot in the lifeboat to someone with a child. The men who rowed back into the darkness, knowing they might pull up only silence. The Titanic also left behind a trail of art and culture, poems, paintings, novels, countless films. Some fanciful, others gritty. The story adapts to each era. During war, it becomes a parable of duty. In peace, a tale of love. In modern times, a reminder of technology's limits and of our hubris. James Cameron's 1997 film reintroduced the story to millions. Some criticize it for its romantic lens, but even skeptics admit it made people feel. It stirred imaginations. It reminded the world that this was more than rusty metal on the ocean floor. Even now, school children know names like Captain Smith and Molly Brown. They reenact the ship's final plunge with model boats and bathtubs. Museums recreate staterooms. Some travelers pay thousands to visit the wreck in submersibles, risking their own lives to peer through murky darkness at what's left. And down there, on the seafloor, Titanic sleeps. 2.5 miles beneath the waves, she rests in eternal twilight. Her bow is crumpled from impact. Her railings are coated in rust. The grand staircase is gone, but its ghost lingers in imagination. Shoes remain, pairs, scattered, because leather does not decay quickly in salt water. The bodies have long dissolved, but the shoes endure. Silent markers, footnotes to lives once lived. And what do we do with this memory? We listen. We tell it again, softly, carefully, not just as fact, but as experience. We keep the voices alive, not to reopen wounds, but to keep eyes open, to hold on to what matters. To remind ourselves that behind every statistic is a person, and behind every disaster, 1,000 quiet acts of courage. As one survivor once whispered, the ship went down, but the stories did not. And so, in the gentle rocking of waves and the hush between stars, we remember, not just the ship, but the souls. As time flows further from that cold April night, the Titanic continues to haunt the world, not like a ghost to fear, but like a memory too powerful to let fade. Each passing decade brings new generations, new technologies, new tragedies. But somehow, the Titanic remains, ageless, unsinkable in the minds of those who listen. And listening is what we do. Because this story isn't just about a ship. It's about the people who boarded her with dreams in their suitcases and hope in their hearts. It's about the quiet dignity of final moments and the ripples left behind by those who never reached their destination. Let's drift now into the aftermath. What became of those who stepped into the lifeboats and those left behind in memory? Survivors faced the challenge of carrying on. Some, like Madeline Astor, widow of John Jacob Astor I, V, returned to lavish estates with a newborn child, but without the man she loved. Her grief was dressed in silk and watched by reporters. Others, like the third-class Irish immigrants who landed in America with only the clothes they escaped in, found themselves in strange cities without sponsors or family. They were helped by charities or fellow survivors. But many never spoke of the voyage again. A few, like Lucy, a second-class teenager who lost both parents, were taken in by distant relatives. She eventually became a teacher and told her students the story only once. And then there was Milvina Dean, the youngest passenger on Titanic, just 9 weeks old at the time of the sinking. She lived until 2009, never remembering the disaster itself, but living in its shadow for nearly a century. She once said, with a weary smile, "I didn't survive Titanic. My mother did that for me." Over the years, reunions were held. Survivors gathered quietly in hotel conference rooms, at memorial services, or on oceanfront benches in Southampton or Halifax. They looked older, wore name tags, and embraced like family because they were. Only they truly understood what it was like to stand on a tilting deck or row into a black night filled with voices and fear. Some returned to the sea. In 1995, at age 90, survivor Eleanor Johnson Schumann stood aboard a cruise ship that sailed over Titanic's resting place. She leaned on the rail and dropped a single rose. "For my brother," she whispered. For some, there was closure. For others, no such thing. The Titanic's rediscovery in 1985 brought both wonder and pain. The world watched grainy black and white footage of her bow, still regal despite the ruin. Rusticles clung like icicles. Sea life swam through broken windows. Artifacts began to emerge. A pair of spectacles, a violin, porcelain teacups still stacked. There were debates, ethical, emotional, even legal, about salvaging items from the wreck. Some called it grave robbing. Others called it preservation. Museums carefully curated exhibitions. Visitors filed past glass cases, whispering reverently. Few looked away. The ship became a classroom. Maritime law was overhauled in her name. The International Ice Patrol still scans the North Atlantic each season. Lifeboat drills are mandatory. Radio equipment is regulated. In these ways, Titanic saved lives long after she sank. And she inspired countless others to become historians, designers, safety engineers, authors. Her story sparked curiosity in children who would grow up to chart the deep sea or fly spacecraft, because if we can learn from the ocean's darkness, we can dare to reach the stars. She also became a symbol in our culture. In the face of global events, wars, recessions, pandemics, people often reference Titanic. Rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, they say, when systems fail. Women and children first, when sacrifice is needed. Her metaphors became shorthand for human instinct, pride, and resilience. And in popular imagination, she remains vivid. There are more books about Titanic than almost any other ship in history. Board games, documentaries, novels, films each layering fact with fiction, heartbreak with spectacle. But at the center, always, are the real people. Frank Goldsmith, who was 9 when Titanic sank, remembered how no other sound, no wind or wave, ever quite matched the scream of people in the water. He grew up beside a baseball stadium and said, when the crowd cheered, it sounded like the voices again. He told his son only once. Many survivors kept silent, not from shame, but because words felt too small for the experience. Instead, their memories lived in actions, in choices, in the way they held a child tighter at night, or refused to waste a crumb, or looked at the ocean with a mix of fear and reverence. The Titanic isn't just a sunken ship or a historical footnote. She is a vessel for human truth about risk and reward, courage and error, love and loss. And somehow, through over a century of retelling, her power remains. Each person who hears her story becomes a part of it. Each time her name is spoken softly in a room, a light flickers back on in the memory of the world. We return to her because she reminds us of fragility, because in her splendor, we see our ambition. In her fall, we find humility. And in her survivors, those who rode and wept and waited, we find ourselves. A century on, Titanic's story still drifts through our world like a faint melody carried on the wind, its notes echoing in unexpected places. Perhaps you felt it too, in the hush of a darkened theater as the lights dim, in the ache of new parents whispering lullabies, or in the sharp crackle of an early morning radio show recounting lost souls. Titanic endures as a ghost ship in our imaginations, its legacy woven into our culture in ways both grand and subtle. On the ocean floor, the wreck lies at 2.5 miles deep, surrounded by silence and cold. Remotely operated vehicles scan her broken hull, sending back video that shows steel twisted open, hallways collapsed, and personal artifacts strewn across the seamed china. Shoes, lanterns frozen in time. Each fragment retrieved from the abyss is a voice speaking across generations. A chipped teacup becomes a testament to fine dining. A children's doll to innocence. A pocket watch to the preciousness of each second. These relics are cataloged, studied, displayed in museums with hushed reverence, proof that even in rust and ruin, human stories survive. Above the waves, Titanic's ghost whispers in annual memorials. On April 15th, lights dim in harbors around the world. Descendants of survivors lay wreaths in Southampton and Halifax. A pianist plays Nearer, My God to Thee, in an empty church. Newspapers publish letters penned by long-dead passengers. For a moment, the bustle of modern life stills, and we listen. In education, Titanic is more than a subject. It's a lens. Students examine the social stratification aboard, debating how privilege affected survival. They calculate buoyancy and hull integrity in physics class. They analyze Morse code messaging in computer labs. And beyond technical lessons, they learn empathy. Each name on the passenger list is a person, with hopes, fears, and a story cut short. Titanic becomes a bridge between history and humanity. Even popular culture reimagines her endlessly. Novels retell the voyage from fictional perspectives, stewards, musicians, stowaways, giving voice to the voiceless. Films remix fact with romance, arguing that love itself can be a lifeboat. Board games let players juggle lifeboat loading, wireless messages, and iceberg avoidance, sometimes with a wry wink at our modern obsession with gamification. Tourist attractions recreate staterooms and staircases. Immersive experiences let visitors feel the ship's tilt, hear the creak of rivets, taste the authentic cucumber sandwiches served at tea. Perhaps most haunting are the personal connections still alive today. People discover that a great-grandparent's name appears in the Titanic manifests, prompting family quests to uncover photographs and letters. A stranger contacts you online because your ancestors saved their own. Social media threads spring up, sharing rare artifacts and untold anecdotes. The past feels just a finger tap away. Meanwhile, the wreck itself remains a site of scientific and ethical debate. Should we recover more items, or leave Titanic undisturbed as a gravesite? Art historians argue for preservation. Marine biologists study the iron-eating bacteria that slowly dissolve the hull. The sea both protects and erases, growing new ecosystems around the wreck even as corrosion claims its structure. It's a reminder that memory, like metal, is subject to time's inexorable pull. Titanic's story also resonates in moments of modern crisis. Headlines invoke Titanic when systems fail or disasters loom. We whisper unsinkable with ironic dread. We compare environmental collapse to rearranging deck chairs. This shorthand holds a cautionary power. It warns us that pride without preparation, division without compassion, and progress without humility can lead to disaster. Yet amid all the lessons and warnings, there remains a quiet magic. A stranger might name-drop Titanic to spark conversation. A bedtime storyteller might weave her tale into a sleep-inducing narrative. Somewhere out there, someone is softly breathing, "I'm on the ship," before drifting off, imagining the chill air, the music, the stars. Titanic's ghost is not a specter of fear, but a companion in contemplation. She invites us to reflect on our own journeys, the dreams we pack, the walls we build between us, the choices we make when the water rises. Her echo reminds us of fragility, but also of courage, kindness, and the enduring power of human stories to float long after steel has sunk. Titanic may rest beneath miles of seawater, but her story sails on in memorials, in museums, in midnight musings and morning classrooms. And every time we remember her, we keep alive the voices of those who once called her home. The sea now lies gentle, the waves whispering their soft, repetitive lullaby. Remember the hush after the music stopped and the world held its breath, an echo fading into calm. Let the memory of Titanic's grand decks, her lights, and her people drift away like petals floating downstream. Feel the slow, steady rhythm of your heart, matching the pulse of the ocean. Each beat a reminder that you are here, safe, warm, and breathing. Let your thoughts ease from the ship's grandeur to the simple, enduring gestures of kindness. The hand offered, the coat shared, the song played so others could find comfort. Those acts, fleeting yet profound, remind us that even in the darkest hours, humanity's gentleness can be a guiding light. Now, as your eyelids grow heavy, imagine the hush of stars above a calm sea, the steady hum of engines long still. Picture the muffled chime of dinnerware, the rustle of silk gowns, the gentle murmur of conversation's echoes now softened by time. Let these images become a soft canvas against the night, where your own dreams can paint their stories. Allow your breath to slow, each exhale releasing the day's tensions into the vastness beyond. You are part of a long human narrative, of hopes launched into the unknown, of voyages taken, of songs sung in the face of uncertainty. In that shared experience, find comfort. You belong to an unbroken chain of dreamers and survivors. Rest now, carried on the ocean's gentle swell. Sleep envelops you like a woolen blanket, soft and secure. And as you drift, remember, history may hold tragedies, but it also holds every whisper of courage, every gentle smile, and every heart beating softly in the dark. Sweet dreams.